5. Both teams have scored. No is heavily favoured in this market at 1.75. The Asian handicap line is a drawn bet market with Seville slight favourites at 1.96. And the goal line, we were chatting about this off air, 1.5. But that is shaded a good bit towards the over, Miguel. So before we get going, and just in terms of a betting game, look, a lot of people would tune in for this final, having not really watched much of Serie A, let alone Roma in the Europa League. Miguel, just sum up Jose Mourinho over the last couple of years, because he hasn't been quiet in Italy, it's safe to say.
No, it's interesting. I mean, this is a game basically involving a lot of European heritage or football heritage or Europa League heritage. As Mourinho once said before another game involving Sevilla, that I suppose showcased one of the reasons he's in the Europa League now, not the Champions League. That was said when Sevilla knocked Manchester United out of the last 16, 5 years ago now. And I suppose since then, it has been relatively steady decline for me. Just something that, I mean, obviously this has been a longer debate in football, but it is something that happens to the best. Right? It happened to Giovanni Trapattoni. What happened to basically everyone but Alex Ferguson, which they go from the peak, and it's about, I suppose, then jobs just that level down every next time. And that's been the case with Mourinho and Roma, given they have been, I suppose, a second-tier club in that European ranking, which is reflected in the fact that his Europa Conference last year was their first ever European trophy and their first trophy in 2 decades. But he has got on from that now to go to the final of Europe's second-tier competition. The one, I suppose, that really launched him as an international star when he won it 20 years ago with FC Porto, beating Celtic in what was a genuinely brilliant final. This is up against Sevilla. The issue here, while Mourinho has never lost a European final, he's up against, well, a team, with genuine Europa League heritage in Sevilla, the competition's most successful ever club. They just seem to have an aura about them. And even like this season has been remarkable. Previously, people would have put it down to Emery. I think Lopetegui's victory in 2020 showed it was about more than that. It was about something to do with the club. And here they are again, having changed their manager twice this season. Before another game with Manchester United, that has been the launch pad now for another remarkable run where they keep defying the odds. And it does mean there's a lot in this match, a lot of strands going into, I think, a really engaging game, clash of forces in that way. And also very, very different form, but I'm sure we'll come on to that. But certainly, a manager who doesn't lose European finals against a club who doesn't lose Europa League finals.
Yeah, that's well set up from Miguel, Mark. A little bit on Roma again. Look, their season, they've kind of tailed off. Jose Mourinho was definitely focused on the Europa League over the last 5 or 6 games. They were in the hunt for a Champions League spot automatically in the top 4 in Serie A. So for those, again, that aren't quite tuned into Serie A, what has happened in those last 6-7 games? Is it just been purely that Jose's prioritised the Europa League final?
Yeah, in a nutshell, I would completely ignore all the Serie A results and performances over the last month, because he's made no sort of bones about it. The Europa League and winning the Europa League is, in his view, was the best strategy to get into the Champions League next year. He felt even before Juventus had their points deduction that it was going to be too tall a task to compete on both fronts, basically. So he has totally prioritised Europe, and you'll see that in his team selections in recent weeks, where some of them have been sort of a half-assed kind of first 11, if you like. But at the weekend, going into that game, I looked at it and thought there's an opportunity there for Roma. But he's no interest in picking up domestic points at the minute. It's all about this final, completely all in. And Sevilla, I'd say probably to a similar level, at least in the last fortnight or so. I think they've realised that kind of getting into Europe is still possible in La Liga, but it's obviously got much more difficult now in recent weeks. But they've also had their eyes on this prize as well. And I think Sevilla, Miguel set up perfectly for both clubs, really. But just to look at Sevilla, really, you've got Mourinho, first of all, who's obviously the final king, really. He's won 13 of his 16 finals across domestic and European football, including all 5 in Europe. Obviously got that tattoo on his arm after winning the Conference League last year as being the first and only guy to win all 3 major European trophies. He's very proud about that. He wants everyone to know about that. And then you got Jose Luis Mendilibar now at Sevilla, who's their 3rd coach of the campaign. Obviously, Lopetegui left in October. Sampioli couldn't get a tune out of that squad. But Mendilibar came in. He's engineered a magnificent kind of upturn. Sevilla were in the midst of a relegation battle before his arrival, but they're comfortably clear of the relegation now. They've only lost twice under his watch. And he is the complete opposite, really, of a Mourinho. He's a very kind of Well, he's quite a calm character, if you like. He's 62 years old and he's never won a major trophy as a player or a coach. He's been historically seen as more of a kind of promotion specialist and more of a firefighter, if you like, with lower ranked clubs. His A-bar team in particular, basically in the last couple of years, were probably more kind of suited to what a Mendilibar type is, rather than sort of carrying Sevilla to a Europa League final. And as Miguel said, he's done this in dramatic fashion. You know, that dramatic comeback at Old Trafford, and then steamrolling United in Spain, and then going through to the semi-finals, where I thought Sevilla were absolutely fantastic away at Juventus and deserved to win that game, but they conceded very late on in stoppage time, then progressed in extra time. But yeah, they believe this is their competition, this is their trophy. They believe their club is a divine right, really, to win this. So, and team news-wise, both teams will be pretty much close to full strength. Sevilla do have Marcos Acuna suspended. He's a bit of a hothead anyway, so I don't think they'll miss him massively with Alex Telles coming in, and a Roma of Chris Smalling back at centre half, which just allows Brian Cristante to move into midfield, really. And Paulo Dybala has been the big sort of fitness concern in recent weeks, but he's trained in the last couple of days, so I expect him to be involved. Whether he'll start or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm expecting a very competitive contest here between two teams with a real determination, a real confidence that they can actually go on and complete the job.
Okay, yes, the guys have set the game up well in terms of context. Miguel, we were laughing about the goal line there and how short it is. I don't know if I've ever seen 1.5 outside of internationals. But this is a special game, I guess, Europa League final with these two teams involved. Where are you looking for in terms of a bet, and how do you see the game unfolding?
I suppose we've got to go on terms of probabilities of what's going to happen, or really how the likely tactical context of the game and what will stem from that. And I suppose it feels like everything in this match is going to be dictated by Mourinho's approach to finals, which is, I mean, this is one of the things about Mourinho, and I was thinking about it. It was at that point, just to suppose, when there was the biggest debate over whether he was still the manager he had been, which was when he took Manchester United to the Europa League final in Stockholm in 2017 and played an Ajax team that were much younger and much more callow than United, and really actually a very different team to the Ajax one that got to the semi-finals of the Champions League 2 years later. And despite that, and despite United's superior strength, and this was emphasised by a kind of a coaching conference that Mourinho did later, when he spoke through his approach in the game, and it was all about stopping Ajax playing, and specifically Davinson Sanchez, who of course would go on to manage at Tottenham Hotspur. And this, I mean, well, that's a sort of approach that over the course of a season is probably why Mourinho, why he's not at the absolute elite clubs anymore, because that level is now all about systemized approaches, about imposing your game, basically kind of an evolution of the pressing possession style that has basically dominated the last decade, and to a certain degree, not rendered Mourinho obsolete, but ensured his methods are overtaken. That's good, and that's obviously better over the course of a season. But in a one-off game, something so forensic as this does give you that fighting chance. It's been the construction of Mourinho's career from from basically, I suppose, the first decade of the 2000s, when football was actually much more low scoring. But even now, in a game like this, it can just, I suppose, it's about percentage playing. And I think that's going to govern everything here, which is why it's difficult not to see this being a really tight game. And as regards kind of calculating what's possible from that, that's what it comes from. And I have to say, I was thinking about any range of draws. I was thinking about two draws, 0-0 or 1-0. So, yeah, when you see draw at under 2.5 at 3.55, it feels like the obvious choice.
Yeah, it does seem the obvious choice, Mark. And it's one of those, and we've talked about this before in the podcast, when you're back in the unders, I guess. And if there's an early goal, it might sort of ruin it for you. But I just feel if there's an early goal here, the game sort of stays in the same flow that it would otherwise.
Yeah, I think the only way we don't get the kind of tight, tetchy game we're probably anticipating is if Sevilla score first, because, well, it depends when that goal arrives, but I think that will obviously push Roma and Mourinho a little bit more out of their comfort zone. But if Roma score first, then, I mean, everything we're talking about right now is probably going to be doubled and multiplied even further, because Roma are in the knockout phase of the Europa League. 8 games, all 8 have gone under 2.5 goals. 5 of those 8 have featured a maximum of just 1 goal. And anyone who saw the semi-final second leg against Leverkusen, it was the full art, really, of Jose Mourinho, dogged and sort of diligent defending, but a ridiculous amount of time wasting and theatrics and gamesmanships, really. So, yeah, I think if Roma score first, Sevilla in trouble. And Sevilla, whilst defensively they're capable, they're probably not on the same level as Roma. So I was slightly surprised to see them, very, very, very slight favourites. But even still, I probably would give Roma the edge if I had to back a team to win the trophy. But in terms of the real odds and the bets here, the goal expectancy is just 2.15. And as you say, that's why under 2.5 goals is far too short to support. But, low goal games tend to increase the likelihood of a draw. And so, I'm quite enthused to see that the draw is the biggest price of the three major outcomes. At 3.05. Interestingly, 5 of the last 15 Europa League finals have been drawn in 90 minutes. And if we are to see a draw, it's very unlikely to be a 2-2 or a 3-3, is it? It's more likely to be a 0-0 or a 1-1. So I'm very much in line with Miguel in taking the 3.55 on the draw under 2.5 goals, basically covering the 0-0 and the 1-1. It's a very nice boost, even on the regular draw price. But I was also quite keen on the BTTS no option as well at 175, which you mentioned, Dan, because that does cover the 1-0 or the 2-0 either way. It's an approach we took at the Championship playoff final. Paid out obviously the bigger price paid out on that occasion. So we're effectively covering all the likeliest low scoring options. But if you wanted just one bet for this match, it would be the 3.55 on the draw. And under 2.5 goals, I think it's very fair considering the goal expectancy. And I think if you look towards the whole of the market, the best price you'll get on this match being decided on penalties is just 4-1. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the layers and the traders are expecting from this fixture.
I hadn't checked those odds across the board on the penalty shootout. That seems crazy to me, but just shows you what the expectancy is for this game. So the draw and under 2.5 goals, agreement from both Mark and Miguel. If you are having a bet on this game, 3.55. So looking forward to that game in Budapest tomorrow night, 8 o'clock. We will move to our second game, which is the FA Cup final on Saturday.